Since I believe that every book is a GURPS book, I would like to review one of the more infamous D&D 3.5 books. Complete Psionic is part of a series of books that introduce many new options, but some of them also had some nice stuff for the GMs as well. I like psionics in D&D, I like psionics in GURPS, and I like psionics in general, so this should be a perfect book for me, right? First of all, the book introduces four classes. For some reason the Aerod class is in the back of the book. I guess that's because of it's a variant Scion class, but I could call the Ardent a variant Scion class too, as there aren't that many differences. So let's talk about the classes. The first class is the Ardent. I already talked about it in one of my videos, but let's reiterate. Ardents gain access to psionic powers by acknowledging fundamental philosophical constants that transcend the physical, emotional, or ideological boundaries. Do you understand what that actually means? I don't. It's a word salad to me. I think even Wizards of the Coast themselves realized that, and in the 4th edition renamed the Wilder class to Ardent. In terms of mechanics, it basically worked like a normal Scion, but gained access to pre-selected power packages called mantles. I recall this class getting a lot of praise, as it was strong, fun to play, and not as overpowering as the normal Scion. The second class is the Divine Mind. This class is similar to a Paladin, but instead of divine spells and smite, the Divine Mind got a very limited assortment of psionic powers and an ability to project a psionic aura. This class was widely criticized online. In terms of power, it was one of the worst classes in the game, and many seemed to hate the flavor. Gaining psionic powers from worshipping a deity definitely isn't something that immediately makes sense. Personally, I didn't find this class that offensive in terms of flavor, but I believe that a third-party supplement titled The Mind Divine by Dreamscard Press did a much better job with it by introducing god minds. That concept found a way into my GURPS games as well. The third class is the Lurk. Basically, this psionic rogue, not to be confused with a psychic rogue. That's a different class that was published for free in one of the Mind's Eye articles. It's too bad that Wizards of the Coast decided to purge their article archive, but I'm glad that I managed to download an archived copy. In terms of flavor, there's pretty much nothing, and the mechanics are quite lackluster. It's not awful, but it could have been better, but since there is no flavor to speak of, I cannot adapt this class to GURPS. How would it be different from any other psionic character? The final fourth class, the Aerod, is hidden at the end of the book. Previously it was published in Dragon magazine. This class had a big impact on D&D 3.5, and also indirectly made certain other classes stronger, such as the Artificer. I remember thinking about how to bring the Aerod class to GURPS, but then realized that both the Aerod and the normal Scion would work identically in GURPS, so there is no reason to separate them. Then we have 8 prestige classes. All of them use the so-called expanded class format. If you remember, in the earlier days of D&D 3.5, base or prestige classes often only had very short descriptions, followed by their tables and mechanics. Later a new format was introduced, with a much more detailed description of the class itself, how it fits into the game, how it fits into the world, and how you can adapt it, and even sample encounters and sometimes organizations. This expanded flavor information makes it much easier to integrate the class into the game world, even if you're using a different system, such as GURPS. The first prestige class is the Anarchic Initiate. This is something of a Wilder plus, with an even stronger lean onto chaos. The class features allow him to overload his psionic powers with a chance of them going awry, and also create breaches to the plane of Limbo, a place of primordial chaos. The breaches range from chaotic energies disrupting psionic powers of others to an actual portal to Limbo. Personally, I actually quite like this class, even though I'm not sure how it builds some of its abilities in GURPS. The next one is the Eon Saint. This is a stealthy class with some psionic abilities that let him read thoughts, disappear from the mind, and do some similar things. Honestly, I'm not sure why this class even exists. I feel that all of these abilities could have been rolled into the base Lurk class. As for a GURPS conversion, telepathic abilities from GURPS psionic powers already cover all this, basically. The next one is the Ectopic Adept, a prestige class that specialized on the astral construct psionic power. He can manifest this power faster, and his constructs are tougher and more flexible. Also, an Ectopic Adept can create 2 astral constructs at once, something a normal Psion could do before the release of Complete Psionic. So this book also acts as something of an errata to a problem that I don't think was even a problem. I remember people being incredibly upset about this change. Overall, I do not find this class interesting. I don't think it brings anything new to the table. Then we have the Flare Spawn Psychic, another controversial prestige class. Mechanically it's a bit lackluster, you simply get extra feats and features that make you more and more like a Mind Flayer. Many players had a problem with the flavor of this class. The Flare Spawn Psychic gains his powers due to his Mind Flayer heritage. The Mind Flayers came from the future, then how come you are exhibiting traits of the Mind Flayer ancestors? To me this complaint doesn't make that much sense, as while the Mind Flayers did come from the future, they still arrived a long time ago and had enough time to spread their genes. I have seen many reflavoring this class in a way that you are the ancestor of the Mind Flayers, and not the other way around. On the other hand, if you know the reproductive mechanism of Mind Flayers, it makes you question how genes are transferred, but I guess in a world full of magic anything is possible. Or you could say that the Mind Flayers experimented on your ancestors, and now you're exhibiting these traits. This is how the Grey Dwarfs got their psionic powers, isn't it? The next prestige class is the Illuminati Soul. This is a soul knife who forged a connection to the positive energy plane, so now his mind blade emits light and is baneful to the undead. Well, this is pretty cool and actually something new. This is borderline non-psionic in flavor. On the other hand, photokinesis, the ability to control light, is a thing. Necrokinesis from Pyramid 399 is a thing, and the teleportation power could be the justification for the interplanar connection. So I guess this could work. Perhaps I should adapt this one to GURPS. The Soul Bow is another prestige class for the Soul Knife class. This one was generally beloved, as it transformed the Soul Knife into a ranged combatant. In D&D I'm more or less okay with this class. In GURPS another question arises. Why isn't the Mind Arrow simply a generic psychokinesis ability? Then we have the Storm Disciple prestige class. This one is for ardents and divine minds who focus on the concepts of storms and worship deities of storm. As I said before, I don't think this even works in terms of flavor, but if you want to replicate the mechanics in GURPS, just go for the electrokinesis psionic power. The final prestige class is the Zer Cobide. This one is pretty cool. It is centered around the psionic martial art based on precognition and time manipulation. You definitely can make something like this in GURPS by using the ESP and chronokinesis psionic powers, and I believe that an ESP based martial art already can be found in one of the Pyramid issues. The next chapter is devoted to Feats. This is probably the laziest chapter in the book. While it takes almost 20 pages, 90% of the feats are incredibly lame. Most of them just let members of a psionic race use one of their racial psionic ability more times per day, or gives additional effects. I think most of them could have been combined in a single feat called something like extra racial psi-like ability use, and you could have saved 10 pages. The Soul Knife class also gets some feats that alter the appearance of its mind blade to that of one of the exotic weapons, such as a double-bladed sword, orc double axe, dwarven orgrush, or even dire flail. This feels dumb to me. There are also two new feat categories. Illicit Heritage feats give you some Mind Flayer themed abilities, and I think these feats are there mostly for the Flare Spawn Psychic Prestige class. Host feats give you new abilities. They can only be taken if the character is hosting a psionic entity in his body, the Quarry. You're probably familiar with them if you're familiar with the Eberron setting. These feats are pretty cool. Then we have a chapter devoted to psionic powers and items. This one really is a mixed bag. Due to the introduction of the Ardent and Divine Mind classes, there are many psionic powers that don't really seem to fit the psionic flavor, at least to me. For example, concussive detonation creates a telekinetic explosion. While kind of boring, it perfectly fits the psionic flavor. On the other hand, we have something like Blackstone Hammer. You alter the nature of one weapon and imbue it with the ability to petrify those it strikes. In what world is this a psionic power? Or Larval Flares, a power that summons several larval mind flares. Or Planar Apotheosis, that transforms you into a fiendish or celestial creature. I just don't know, this stuff doesn't feel psionic to me at all. As much as people say that psionics is simply reflavored magic, I disagree. There are many flavor differences. Also, many of the powers introduced in this book actually are just psionic variants of magic spells, due to the aforementioned Ardent and Divine Mind classes. Of course, there's also the controversial nerf to the Astral Construct power that many players were upset about. The psionic item section suffers from the same problem. While many of the items are quite interesting, many of them also do not feel like psionic items at all. The next chapter is devoted to new monsters. It's quite a short one. First up, we have different variants of astral constructs, and I like them. It just makes sense that different psionic characters create different astral constructs. Imagination is the limit. The ectoplasmic swarm is quite uninspiring, but not offensive either. The elemental envoys are weird. Basically, they are small humanoid elementals, whose entire purpose is to serve psionic characters on the material plane. They are something akin to familiars to psionic characters. But weren't psi crystals supposed to be that? It feels like these elemental envoys are intruding upon the psi crystal niche and dilute the psionic flavor. I don't really like them in this role, but I'm fine with them as independent creatures. Larval Flares are, well, larval mind flayers. You know that they reproduce through cerimorphosis, but if a mind flayer tadpole is left to grow, it becomes a larval flare. I believe that this is something of a misnomer, because technically speaking this is a larval neothelid, not a larval mind flayer. But that's not a big deal. Shadow Efts are more like shadow They are just evil outsiders from the plane of shadow that are averse to light and are only mildly psionic. Cilic Guardian is a psionic archon. There really isn't much to say here, it's basically a standard archon package with an assortment of psi-like abilities. Also, this monster is a good example of the lack of coordination between writers and artists at Wizards of the Coast. A description says that the glyphs that orbit the archon are blood red, but the artists seem to disagree with that. Spectral Savant is something of a psionic ghost lich. I find it lame, but I also have a friend who thinks that this is one of the coolest monsters. This is a matter of personal taste. In any case, if you want to use any of these monsters in GURPS, I have converted all of them on my blog. The final chapter is titled Character Options, as if most of the previous chapters were not character options. But honestly, for me this is the best part of the book. First up, we have an entirely new psionic race, the sinat. These humanoids hail from a parallel material plane, accessible through the plane of shadow, forced out of their homeland by some psionic monstrosities. This alone has a lot of world-building potential. Can they even access their home plane, or did they lose this knowledge? Do the aforementioned psionic monstrosities threaten this world or not? The sinats may be the harbingers of doom, or they may actively work to protect this world against incursions from the parallel world. There is definitely a lot of potential here. The defining racial feature of the sinat is the compartmentalized mind that is split into three parts: the overmind, the collective, and the oracle. In GURPS terms, I gave them compartmentalized mind too, with mental separation only, and an innate access to the prognostication psionic ability. Then we have the 6 hidden houses. These are secretive human ethnicities with innate psionic talent. Collectively known as the Talair, these people also have arrived from another world, as their own world was destroyed by an evil force known as the Enemy. Very creative, I know. Snarkiness aside, I really like this concept. The 6 houses aren't exactly on friendly terms with one another, and this creates a lot of adventuring opportunities for the GM and players alike. This material isn't really original, it's a rework of an article titled Mind Lords of Talaron from Dragon Magazine 281. Some lore was changed around, some names got replaced with something more psionic sounding. For example, the House of Telepaths used to be called Kestra in Dragon Magazine, but in Complete Psionic it's called Cogitare. Also, in the original article the enemy isn't that mysterious, it's clearly stated to be the Mind Flayer Empire. Generally speaking, the article provides more information than Complete Psionic, such as how exactly did the Talair come to this world, an example adventure, etc. Overall, this is some good stuff, even if you do not have the article itself. I have integrated the Talair into my setting. Then we have racial classes and epic progression rules, for which I don't care about, and the erudite class that I already talked about. Finally, Complete Psionic has 2 psionic guilds, the Diamond Knights and the Lodge Luminus. The Diamond Knights is a knight order devoted to exterminating evil psionic creatures. Just like the 6 hidden houses, this organization has its roots on the home world of the Talair. This guild also is described in Dragon Magazine 281. The Lord Luminous believes that psionic energy is derived from the psychic sun, a font of energy that exists in the heart of every living creature, and their ultimate goal is to find the one mind, the person whose psionic power flows without distortion from the psychic sun. It's fine, I guess. And that's it for the book. What I haven't mentioned is that it also suffers from horrendous editing problems. Some mechanics have unclear wording. Some feats list effective manifestor level for powers that do not depend on manifestor level. There are many such problems in this book, but that's something that D&D players have to suffer from. Despite all the problems, this book never received a errata, at least officially. Only 7 years after the release, one of the authors leaked the errata document online, saying that the document was made a long time ago, but it just couldn't be released due to some perturbations at Wizards of the Coast. And it still hasn't, but you can find it if you Google it. Overall, this book is a thematic mess. There are some interesting parts that I borrowed from my GURPS games, but for the most part, it's very underwhelming and doesn't really feel psionic. It should have been titled Complete Somewhat Psionic. Perhaps this is the reason why almost none of this material got adapted in later D&D editions. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.